I'm Adam Jennings, and this is Awaiting Approval, a podcast about the messy human side of creative leadership. Today, I'm joined by Laura Baker, Managing Director at Fearless, founding member at 50, and experienced design leader, for a relaxed, two-way conversation about her journey, the lessons she's learned, and what it takes to lead with creativity and honesty. Laura, hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Of course. I'd love to start us off just nice and light, and also with a question that helps people get to know a little bit more about you. If we were recording this in person, where would you suggest we meet, and what would you order to drink?
What would I order to drink? That's a very easy one. I'm a big tea drinker, so there would probably be maybe a green tea or a peppermint tea or something in there. Although in this lovely weather, maybe a tea's not the best option, but no, I always love a tea. And where would we meet? I mean, we'd probably have to find somewhere halfway between the two of us, which I'm not sure how easy that would be in terms of your location and mine. But I am normally running around London on any given day between West London, East London, wherever. But I have a little home with the team in Shoreditch and Liverpool Street. So that's normally a nice little easy location for me. And it's a little bit of home, I think. The majority of, I mean, I can get into my background, but I've pretty much always been agency side in the last kind of 10 years or so. And I have predominantly worked around Old Street and Shoreditch. So that is sort of a little home away from home for me.
Tea, absolutely on the cards. Maybe in weather like this, an iced tea would be nice. So I'll raise a metaphorical glass and cheer you on for your recording and get stuck into it. When was the last time you used pen and paper?
This morning. I'm a post-it note person. I just like having to be able to kind of get things down. So I have post-its kind of everywhere. And good or bad, I'll leave anyone else to think about this. But sometimes my processing happens at very random points of the day and also a lot of time at night. So I have a post-it and a pen next to my bed, and I've even got to the point now where I won't even bother turning the light on because I've got this weird thing where I think it wakes me up. So I will feel for it in the dark, write it, get the Sharpie out, get the post-it note out. It's out of my head. I can fall back to sleep. So
I love the idea about getting that out of your head. You know, in a lot of the conversations I'm having recording these episodes, there's a similar theme of that sort of tactile movement of actually physically writing it out helps release it in some way. With post-it notes, though, that's an intriguing one. I stopped using them a long time ago, other than for things like workshops. I stopped using them a long time ago because I found with my ADHD, I was writing them out, put a stick in them somewhere, and then because I would see them every day, I would just forget about them because they'd be there. So how do you kind of overcome that object permanence, as it were?
it's a really interesting question. I think it depends on what it is. A lot of what I'm trying to get out of my head, it's badly kind of call it badly timed thoughts. Like in the middle of the night, I don't want to be thinking about this. I need to get it out of my head. And it's just something I can pick up in the morning. And then once I've had that in the morning, I don't need it. So I'll probably just chuck it in the bin or the recycling bin because that's the better thing to do. So I don't need it there. I can give you a story. I know we're kind of going to probably some point talk about leadership. My first sort of formal role that came into leadership was very much a surprise role for me. It wasn't something I was necessarily planning. It was sort of something that was handed to me, and it really freaked me out at the time. I was an IC, I was in an account, and the client essentially turned to me and said, we're now putting you over this whole business unit. We've got your team, you've got other agencies, so essentially. And I remember sitting there on the call. One of those moments, it was COVID, like we were on a call. I remember going, you're talking, like, I had that look around moment going, you are talking to me, right? Like, what? But of course, it was a client, so you say yes and you figure it out later and you see how it works. And I woke up at 2, 3 in the morning, just could not sleep. And I got the post-it notes out, and I actually probably spent about that. I did actually get out of bed, turn the light on, sat on the floor of my bedroom for probably like 20 minutes, half an hour, and I did this sort of like ideation session with myself. It didn't matter if I repeated it, all the normal things, just get everything that was in my head out. And then I did a big cluster on the wall and went, okay, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about this, and I'm worried about this. These are like my 3 or 4 key themes. Went back to bed. And from that moment, I intended to go, okay, I'm worried about this, what I'm going to do about it. But I found, to your point, that actually just getting it out of my head and having it not there and being able to visualize what it was that was running around and worrying me was enough for me to just get it out and move forward. And that actually, to your point about permanent, stayed on my wall for about a year and a half. I just left it there because I actually really liked having it there as that sort of reminder of like, okay, well, how am I checking in on this kind of thing, and how am I feeling about this today as opposed to how I remember feeling about it then. So I actually really liked having that as sort of a permanent thing and a way of kind of checking myself and how I was progressing and how I felt the team were doing at that time and the progress that we were making. Because that remit was a bit of a, like, call it a weird one. It was show the value of a design team. That's basically what I was put there to do, which sounds really common sense in a way, like, but essentially it was an account where they had hundreds of designers, but they had designers that sat in their own products, and even though those products were essentially sat next to each other, and even though the users of those products were going across the products, there was no linkage. So it was very much a show what you can do if you actually build a team of designers within this business unit and actually show the value that you could bring. So it was really nice to have that sort of permanent reminder up on the wall to see how far we've been able to move the needle in what became a year or no, 2 years, I think, of work.
It's really powerful, isn't it, to have something there that's a visual reminder, either for you or the whole team. I remember inheriting a number of design teams after a couple of companies merged together, and one of those design teams had a really bad rep at the company they came from, unfairly, unnecessarily. The feeling was that they didn't produce enough and the quality wasn't high enough, which actually wasn't true when I looked through the work that had been done. And I stayed late one night and I printed out work from all of the teams, from all of the people, and floor to ceiling, left to right, one wall that anybody that came into the studio had to walk past. I printed out the work and I stuck it up there and I covered the entire wall with it. And from the next day onwards, anyone that came in, including my team, would literally stop and look. And for my team, initially it was to stop and look and try and find one of the two of their pieces, but everybody else coming in, it was just this reminder. It was a literal wall of great output that the combined studios had done. And I said to the team that day, whenever you do something that you're really proud of, that you really love, print it out, stick it up on the wall, take one of yours down and swap it out and keep this going. And they did. And it became a real sense of pride because it was a constant reminder that to the rest of the organization, we're pumping out really good work at a really high volume. But to my team, it was this reminder of, yeah, I feel pride in the thing that I've done enough to print that out and walk across to the wall in front of everybody else and take something out and stick it up, and claim a stake in that. So I think there's something really wonderful about the fact that you left that there for a year to keep reminding you've got this, the areas that you want to focus on, and it was there as that constant reminder. And it kind of brings me nicely actually to the thing that I'd love to know next, which is if you're currently managing director for Fearless. If you think right back to your very first job, can you give us a bullet point of all the jobs that you've had to the first part where you had that leadership responsibility, and then from there on to where you are today?
Yeah, the first job I had was back in industrial design days, and I worked with a company near Cambridge, and I was sort of their in-house industrial designer. They were technology companies, so I was doing sort of consumer devices, medical devices. They had systems, technology. So it was an interesting job. But I didn't really feel like industrial design was quite right for me. I knew there was something in it, but I didn't love it and I didn't hate it, and I felt a little bit in between. And so that's sort of where I moved more into, well, I just made a switch into the digital side. That was about 10 years ago now. And I moved to an agency after that. And I I went into that, I don't even know if you can call it an interview. I kind of went in through a contact, and I remember sitting with what was there, I think was a creative director, who was one of the co-founders and their head of UX at the time, who I think actually left like 2 weeks after I joined, which was great timing. I went in with my industrial design portfolio and they said, well, why do you want to do UX? And I just said, I don't know if I do. I'm curious about it. I think it could be interesting. I made some sort of joke about digital being the future, and I just said I want to find out if it is what I want to do. And so I went in for 2 weeks of an internship, or 2 weeks of experience, not even an internship. That turned into a 2 month internship, and I was there for about 6.5 years in the end. So I don't know if I want to do this. It was quite a long stint for me. And I left there and I spent, I think, about 9, 10 months in the end contracting after that. I knew in myself that I didn't want to go into another role, at least straight away. I had been in one place for a really long time, and in like lifetime in the digital world. To be somewhere for 6.5 years, it's kind of quite uncommon these days. And so I thought, I've known one team, I've known one way of doing things, I've had this somewhat constrained experience over the last 6.5 years. I want to get out and experience as much as I possibly can in the time that I'm going to be doing this for. So I was very fortunate that I was doing this at the time where the market was very good. And so I just said, look, I'm going to take as many contracts as I can. I'm not going to take anything for more than 6 to 8 weeks. That would be my guardrails was nothing more than 6 to 8 weeks, and nothing that involved much UI at all. So whenever anyone asked me, what do you want to do? I said, let me tell you what I don't want to do. That's going to make it easier. Everything else is fair game, because I just wanted as much breadth of experience as I possibly could. It didn't matter what the industry was. It didn't matter what the work was. It didn't matter what the team was like or the company was like. I just wanted the experience. And it was a really good time. I really enjoyed it. And then it got to the point where I got the message to say, hey, can you join Fearless now, please? There was a new account. I came in to look after that account. I guess rest is history from that point.
I love that idea. And I think it's a running theme, for those that I'm interviewing, that having a breadth of experience at some point in their career has really helped them then niche down and find something that they find purposeful, or they find real connectivity with, or that really kind of drives a passion. So I completely understand that. Was industrial design always the plan, or was it just generally figuring out design solutions, or what was the sort of driver in the beginning for you?
It was never the plan. I'm not someone that really, funny enough, talk to me outside of work life. I am the biggest planner. Everything is worked out. If I go on a trip, it's all figured out, whatever else. But when it comes to work, I've never had a plan. I still don't have a plan. If you were trying to ask me where things are going to be in 3 to 5 years, I've got no idea, and I have no goals as such. I'm very much like, there's so much that's happened in my career that I would never have expected, that I would never have kind of necessarily chosen to walk into, but it's opened so many interesting doors for me that I don't have an intention to plan it. It's very much a let's see what happens and let's go from there. Design, no, it was never the plan. I mean, if you asked me around the age of 7 or 8 what I was going to do while I was older, you would have got, I'm going to be David Beckham. I mean, as stupid as it sounded, my head was in the football world at that point, until I realised that becoming the next David Beckham was not the most practical thing in the world, especially as I played in golf. So stupid thing there, but say that to a 7-year-old. It was never sort of the plan for me. It's very interesting that I've noticed recently, speaking to different leaders, that you ask them about their backgrounds and like how they came into it, and so many will say, "Well, my parents were really creative. I was a really creative kid. I loved drawing. I knew from an age that I didn't necessarily know exactly where I was going to go, but I wanted to kind of do more of this and this artistic." That was not me, and it's never been me, and it still isn't. Like, even the other day we were at a family dinner and we said something about being creative, and my mum was like, you can't draw. She's like, you can do technical drawings, but you can't draw. And I was like, yeah, I know. I'm like, I can't draw a tree, I can't go out and draw a person. Like, I'm hopeless at that stuff. I'd never described myself as creative. And she's like, well, your maths creative. And I was like, that's what it is. Like, I was a big maths kid. Black, white, logic, that makes sense to me. Anything where it was English or like kind of anything too essay based that felt kind of grey space, hated it. Maths made sense. It was black, it was white, it was problem solving, it was logic. And still today, that is my take on design. Of course, there's elements of storytelling that create success in what you do, But I think that's why I moved away from industrial that was much more end to end, at least back then when I was doing it. And why, as I moved into the digital space, I found my home in UX, later in service design, because that's where I naturally found comfort, less so in kind of the UI where it's not of black and white, it's more subjective. So yeah, never the plan for design. My maths, physics, economics and DT, they were my A levels. So the DT was in there, always loved the subject, but I didn't even know at that point that there was a career to be had in it. It was very organic in doing my A levels, trying to figure out what you do. My school was like, oh, so you can go to Oxbridge and do engineering. And I was like, no, I don't really want to do that. Oh, well, my uncle going, oh, you can go and do maths. And I was like, I could go and do maths, but I'm not sure about it. And then he said, well, you can go and do this thing called industrial design in a place called Loughborough. And I was like, well, I don't know what that is. And I've got no idea where that is either. Looked at it on the map and went, oh, that's in the middle of nowhere. But it was very much a step at a time. I was like, yeah, let's go and do this. Like, I don't know what else I'm going to do. And then it's all, as I say, it's been very much a one step to the next step to the next step. No plan really involved in it at all.
Do you feel like that's important for you? That, I mean, I hear the difference between the level of planning outside of work and then that sort of more free spirit approach to work, sort of enjoying the journey and kind of letting it unfold and seeing where it goes, almost sort of living in the moment. Like, which one feels more comfortable to you as you sort of go through the day?
I've never really reflected on the why and the difference before. I think where people have plans is where they have aspirations. I want to be here. This is the kind of end point of my career. And I think maybe because I don't have those aspirations, like maybe because design wasn't necessarily planned, I can't turn around and go, I want to be a CDO. I remember having a conversation with someone when I want to say it was relatively early when I joined Fearless, and I think the guy that I was reporting into at the time, and it was a very sort of sensible-ish question to ask, and he asked me the role that I wanted. I think it was in within Fearless, like where did I want to be, and sort of thinking about kind of senior director at that moment, like if he was to work with me to kind of get there. And my response to him was essentially, well, I don't know if I want to be a senior director. I was, I think, an associate at that point. And I said, well, that's two roles above. I haven't even done the next role yet. How do I know if I'm going to like what that entails at that point? I've never had, I want to be here because I felt like it was disingenuous almost to say I want to be in a place that I don't even know what that would be like. Like, what is the experience of being a CDO or at that point a senior designer? Like, why would I aspire to be in a position that I don't know if I would enjoy or like? And so I think on reflection in this moment, that is probably part of the reason that I have never had a plan, is because I can only see the next thing ahead of me, and I wouldn't try and put myself in a position where I work to something that I'm then not happy in.
I think that makes perfect sense. And there are so many, and I'm sure you've spoken with these as well, there are so many creatives who find themselves in a managerial or a leadership position. And as is often told, like the amount of work that you actually then do, as in the craft, drops to, 1% maybe of your day. And the rest is dealing with people, dealing with budgets, dealing with this, that, and the other. And it's a huge shock because no one really tells you that. So, hi. If what you're hearing is resonating with you where you are in your leadership journey right now, stay tuned until the end. I'll share details on how you can work directly with me to level up your creative leadership. So I think the idea that you've had here, the just sort of going step by step and feeling your way through it, and is this what I want to do right now? Actually sort of like heads that off at the pass, right? Like you're not then just landing in a position and thinking, oh crap, I'm not enjoying this. What am I doing here? Because you've sort of purposefully felt your way through, which makes this next question actually really interesting. Thinking of all of the places that you've worked, If you could go back to one of them to yourself at that age, but knowing what you know now, where would it be and what would you say to yourself?
Oh, okay, deep in the question. Where would I go? I think I'd probably go back to that moment of where I was telling you before, that kind of first leadership role, and just give myself more space. I think I was very anxious at the time. It was a new role, as you say, like no one there's no, I wish there was a playbook that someone could just hand you on how you do this. But there's no kind of silver bullet. And then I think I put a lot of pressure on myself because, as you say, you stop. I mean, there's a lot of player coach roles, so it's not quite the case these days. But when you do really move away from the work, it's not just the fact that you're not doing the work, it's this really large value shift and mindset shift that has to change because as a leadership role compared to an IC role, where your value comes from is like almost a 180. You're not delivering something necessarily. You don't find value in the work that you're delivering. There's suddenly a what the hell am I doing? Like I remember being like, I've just sat in meetings all day. I haven't done anything. I haven't delivered anything. And it really took me a long time to get comfortable with how I reframed the value that I was creating. And I sort of battled with myself over that until I kind of realized, oh no, well, I've just sat in meetings all day, but that is my work. This is the means in which I do my work is through a meeting. And so it took me a really long time to get comfortable with that. And so I think if I could go back, it's all hindsight, right? Like, would I actually change anything? No, because I think you have to go through, call it a difficult time or struggle and to really learn. And I think if you didn't go through that, you'd lose what you have today in a lot of these like tricky situations. Because actually you get a lot of growth from them. So I wouldn't necessarily change it, but I think I'd try and go back and just try and give myself a bit of encouragement to say, don't worry, keep going. You'll kind of figure this out and don't be so hard on yourself type thing.
Mm. I think that's so often the case for creatives. We because like you said earlier, a lot of our output is subjective. There are disciplines that are less so, but even then, that there's still we're relying on our gut instinct, our expertise, and the data that's around us to combine all of those to create a solution. And so there's always an element of, well, I'm not sure if like I've got the right thing here. And I think especially as you're working your way through your career, those moments of I don't feel the confidence in what I'm presenting, or I'm aware of a little kind of wobble in what I'm presenting here, or the thought process. So it makes perfect sense that that would be where you go. Sort of in combat of that, when you think back of everything that you've done, all the work you've produced, the projects you've been on, what's the one piece of work that you're most proud of?
It's actually that, to be honest. It's that kind of work, and that's what we just like the work that was done before that moment, and then the work that was done in kind of the following 2 years. Um, is really kind of what I would say I'm the most proud of. I've said this before, but I think then I think back over my career and then like what I've done with Fearless over the last 3.5 years or so, the thing that always makes me proud is when you leave some sort of legacy, you leave something better than you found it. That's kind of my approach and like the way I've worked with Fearless over the years is that's what I want to do. When we go into an account, when we have a project, it doesn't matter if it's 2 months or a year or whatever that time is, leave something better than you found it. And that could be a talent process, that could be part of the design agency. I think when you can go back and speak to people, ex clients, current clients, and they can say, yeah, we're now doing this because of what you did, or because you started something and now we've been able to do this and you've had an impact and some sort of lasting results and you've opened the door for something new, whether that's like a new service design discipline or you've been able to move stakeholders who were very, what's a nice way of saying this, tentative about design and a bit kind of reluctant to embrace it, through to that same person then going, well, have we done the research on this, or why have we not got a designer in this conversation? And those are the little moments along the way that you've just got to like really take and have those wins. Yes, we've done something, we've made an impact, and it's not massive. And I think often those moments aren't, but it's like those really kind of take where you've just got to take those wins, and you have to stop and reflect and go, that was the same person that sat on their laptop the first workshop that we had and didn't engage. Now is the person saying, have we done the research on this? Like, that's actually a massive win. It might have taken a year and a half, but we've done it, type thing. And those are the things that I think you can always feel, you can be proud of a design that you've delivered or whatever else, for sure. But I think when there's a real human impact, that's always the more exciting thing for me.
Yeah, I agree completely, and that's one of the things that I always look for in a new piece of work. It's what's the mission we're trying to achieve? What's the positive impact that's going to have on humans? And then the third pillar is who am I doing it with? And if I'm in alignment with those three things, but that positive impact piece is so important, and especially as a leader, when you're looking at, say, your team and and helping grow and support your team members, stepping into the more confident version of who you know they can be, and you can see it for them. I think that's great, and I love your your approach to that, which is not necessarily about a specific metric. It's just improvement, seeing engagement. My partner often reminds me, better, not perfect. And I think that's such a great way of looking at things, because incrementally you'll get way further than if you try and reach the end goal straight away, right? That's why we have North Star visions and then build a roadmap to get there, because it's much easier to kind of break everything down. I would love to flip this, and I promise we'll flip it back again, so we won't just stay on the flipped version. But when you think back over your career, what is a sort of an aha moment that's come out of something that hasn't gone as well as you'd hoped, and what did you learn from that?
I would probably do a whole podcast just on that one topic of like all the different failures along the way. I mean, there are so many that come to mind in terms of where I've lost track of projects, where I've been too lost in the weeds and lost the bigger picture, where I haven't had stakeholders aligned from the beginning, and it's caused mayhem and I've had to refix it later down the line. There's so many work related examples that I can give. I guess for me, one of actually the biggest and most impactful was actually nothing to do with the work and to do with the team. I had a designer that joined the company, and when they joined the company, I was very much in kind of go, go, go mode. And essentially, there was less of a aha moment and more of a gut punch moment. Was I basically got told that they were burning out because of me, that essentially they were looking at the way that I was operating, and I hadn't, despite me essentially saying, look, there's no kind of pressure, they were seeing how I was working. They were seeing me sending messages out of hours or doing any of these things. And despite me never expecting anyone to respond in those times, it was me just kind of getting things done. They saw that as sort of the level at which, and there was an expectation to work and whatever else. And just hearing that was, as I say, it was a gut punch moment. I mean, I'll be honest, I went upstairs and like sobbed at the thought of what I was doing. And it was that moment that it sounds stupid to say that you don't realize what your actions, how they're being perceived and what that could do to someone else. And I was like, right, I'm changing that. So I've had to put things in place now with a team where now everyone coming in, I'm very clear on this is what expected. Now, thankfully, Slack and email, you can schedule everything. So if I have to get something out of my head at 8, 9 o'clock at night, I will just schedule it for the next day. That's been a massive saver. But really being very intentional and making sure that no one is working over hours, and if someone is working over hours, that they take the time back. And I will be very upfront with people when they start to say, this is what is expected, this is absolutely not expected. And if there is any grey area, then please come and talk to me, because that gut punch is not something that I ever want to get anywhere near again. That was one of the biggest kind of quote unquote failures I will say that I've ever had, but also one of kind of the biggest, I wouldn't say it was a blessing in a way, but the sort of realization um was a big lesson for me, an important one.
That's a really candid response. It's a very real one. Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that. I think people listening and watching these, it's great for them to hear experienced people like yourself saying that that's happened, because I think so often we're trying hard to do the best that we can, and we think about one aspect of that, but we don't consider what message that sends out, our actions or our behavior, or in terms of an expectation, especially in a leadership role. It's, we there's so much to consider, and I think it's only human that we don't at times consider all the pieces of the puzzle. But I can absolutely empathize that that's a gut punch moment. Absolutely. Promised I would flip it back. So let's flip it back. Outside of work, what's the thing you're most proud of?
That's a great question. I don't know if this is a bit of a kind of cop out answer again or not. I mean, there's kind of like stupid little things along the way, but I think it's just sort of the life that I've kind of built for myself now, and kind of where I'm at in terms of just the people that I have around me. And I mean, there's obviously easy stuff there with your family, like you can't really get rid of them type thing. Like I'm at my parents now, and but I think just having really good people around me, and I think being, I'm not gonna lie, like the last kind of few years or so, I've had a bit of a, I don't know what the right word is, a sort of like realization, boundary setting, all of that kind of stuff, around just kind of like who are the people that I really want in my life, and who are the right people to kind of have around. And sometimes the people that are around you at that moment, you realize aren't necessarily the right people to have around, and that makes things really difficult to then have some hard conversations with yourself to kind of say, right, what am I going to do about this? And I think kind of getting to the place now where, I mean, people talk about sort of having your board of advisors in a sort of work context, having those the right kind of people around you. But I think from a personal perspective, that is even more important in a way, because most people, I think, your work and life bleed into each other, at least some to some degree, in terms of the people and how you kind of share what's going on in your experience, and having the right kind of people outside of work who will also be there to listen to you and whatever else about, and give you some guidance. They don't necessarily know what's going on in the design world or everything else, but they know you as a person and can be there to give you that support. I mean, I'll go to say it, I think it's vital, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. The ability to have a space where you can just talk, and ideally with someone who knows you really well. And, if it's about work, then someone who understands, the intricacies of the day to day, because you can talk to family and friends, but if they don't understand the job itself, the industry itself, there are some nuances that they just won't get. And also, it's kind of, for most family members, it's kind of the contract that they're there to support you, right? So to have someone that is there, that doesn't have to be there, that doesn't have to say the nice things, the supportive things, and that might challenge you, that might say, you know what, actually, I think you're telling yourself something here that isn't true. Um, or, you know what, I've noticed something here and I want to bring it to you, and to have that space for that to all unfold, in a sort of safe way, I think I agree, it's vital. It's absolutely crucial. It's interesting when we think about the amount of change that's going on in the industry right now, everything that's happening with tech and everything that's happening in general across the world with finances and major sort of shifts. Where do you see the creative industries going? I know you've talked about like being in the moment and present and step by step, but there are clearly big changes on the horizon or happening right now. So where do you see the industry going?
Big question. I think there's a lot of exciting things to come. I mean, I know that there's a lot of kind of tech and etc. And we're in a really bad moment right now, but and it's been a really bad moment because I mean the industry is so cyclical, but this just feels like a low of a low. Like it's felt like it's gone on for longer than anyone really thought about it. It's getting very close to the bone, I think, in a lot of places now. We kind of bloated too significantly, and we there was a resizing that was needed, but it's almost gone too far the other way. And I think, unfortunately, in a lot of places, they're cutting, and almost saying like, how close to the bone can we go before this really starts to hurt and we have to stop? So I think things will stay. I think we should never get back to the point that we were, because I think that was too bloated. But I do think we need to be more expansive going forward, and I look forward to the point where things do start to feel a little bit healthier and less skinny. Um, and then obviously there's a whole kind of technological conversation to be had in the form of AI and all the kind of the pace that that is accelerating. Personally, AI doesn't scare me in a sense of, oh my God, it's going to take everyone's jobs. Yes, I think that there will be change and how people work will be different. And yes, it will probably take some jobs, but it's also going to create other jobs and other opportunities. And it's the same as when the internet really kind of came along, and it's the same as when sort of the iPhone came and people started doing apps. Like we've had these sort of big technological waves, if we want to call them that, and we've we have that, and then there's probably going to be another one kind of later down the line. What really scares me about AI is not it taking people's jobs; it's getting into the wrong hands, because I think there's so much power in an opportunity in what AI can do. I saw something the other day that was a girl, I think she was deaf at birth, and they put these kind of glasses on her with AI, some sort of technology in it. And as people were speaking, she could see the words that they were saying, and the emotion of her was like it was heart not it was not heartbreaking, it was joyful in a way. And I thought, what a good use of AI. Like that is beautiful. And then I, on the contrary, think of all of this power that it could bring when it gets into the wrong hands of fraud and people being really vulnerable. That is what really scares me about AI and how it can be used in a really malicious and in a bad intent. So I'm really hoping that as it becomes more predominant, we start teaching kids what it means, because they're already using it. Like I've got a designer on my team who said his daughter's 7, she's already using AI. She's already creating presentations with it and doing all of this stuff. Mind blown at this point, to be honest with you. I mean, I've got friends, kids who seem to come out of the womb with an iPhone in their hand, and they just know that instinctively. I don't know how they do it. They just seem to know that the minute you have a phone, they start swiping on it. And that's interesting, but it's also terrifying that they're just picking these things up so quickly. And so I hope that they have the right guardrails and the right things as we have as a good education around that. But it doesn't scare me about design necessarily. And I think there will be jobs that are lost. There are ways in production that people will have to move into something else. But I guess this is my background from a UX, from a service design perspective. To me, jobs are needed more than ever. Like, yes, AI can do whatever they want to do, but there is still an experience. I think there might be new jobs like if we're using voice, for example, then voice design, conversation, or whatever the right term is, that there's a whole new opportunity there. It's like, okay, what does that look like? Okay, we might not have an interface, but there's still an experience that has to be designed. And I think I was saying to someone the other day that ultimately you have, how is it when the technology comes to play where anyone can build anything, right? Like that's what everyone's talking about, is it's democratizing build, it's democratizing all of this stuff in terms of what people can do. But I think when you're able to build anything, the question then becomes, well, like, should you be building it, for example? But when it's so easy to develop and ship, you actually, how you're doing it is really important as well. And so I think if I think about service design, for example, that when it's set up and managed well, the value is actually really difficult for most organizations to involve. And I think it's needed more than ever with all the changes happening, because like most companies are still very product led. And I think with a lot of the acceleration, it's only going to kind of get quote unquote worse. And product shaping organizational behavior is a problem because that's not how people experience digital products. So we actually really need service design and other forms of design to be looking at not only what we're delivering, but as end-to-end experiences and how we are doing that in a kind of meaningful, human-centric way. So yeah, spiel, rant on that one, but
Okay, technical issues now resolved. So we're
let's
back
hope.
in recording. And my question was, with that shift that's happening across the industry right now, and it's going to happen, continue to happen, what would be your advice to companies hiring in terms of the new skill sets they should be looking for? And what would your advice be to designers in terms of how to expand their toolkit or their skill set?
I think my advice to companies are gonna be is really what my advice to companies always is, which is just you need to be really clear on what you're actually hiring for and why. I think a lot of people say they hire for the future, but the reality is they don't. So I think the more future-proof people can be is wonderful. But I think when naturally when people think about okay, future-proof, they just go, right, we need a unicorn, we need a generalist type thing. And I don't necessarily think that that's always the way to be. And there isn't really one answer that's going to solve every company's problem. If I could sit here and say, this is what all companies should do, but what a scale up's going to do is very different to what a startup's going to do, which is going to be very different to an enterprise organization. So actually, the way people need to hire and the type of people that they need is a very contextual to them, the type of problems that they're solving, and making sure that just because someone is really has been at Meta and all sorts of other parts of the glamour searches doesn't necessarily mean that they're right for you as a founding designer. They're used to working on a really small piece of the puzzle within a system where there's a lot of processes that are already set up and a very strict way of maybe strict's the wrong word, a very kind of stringent way of how things get done. You put that same designer into a startup where they're the only person there, there is no process in place, it's chaos for lack of a better term. Is that designer going to thrive? Maybe, but there's a good chance that they won't. So whenever you're making a hiring decision, be really thinking about who you're hiring for, why you're hiring them, what job do you need them to do, who are they going to be facing off to in an organization, therefore what kind of person do you need, and just looking for people that I suppose if there's any sort of future proofing in there, unless you have a very good view of like what this is going to be in a year or two, which I don't think most companies do, look for certain kind of characteristics in people, look for that sort of adaptability, that curiosity, those kind of, I hate the word, but softer skills in there, right? That kind of isn't the sort of the craft necessarily, but is more the stuff that you can't teach. I guess the reverse of that question was what does a designer do? I think it's invest in those skills. The good thing about being the designer is that kind of invest in your storytelling, invest in your facilitation skills. I think that's really one that a lot of designers don't think. And if you're going to think about AI and the problems that are going to kind of come and people potentially losing their jobs, I think that is the one where, AI is not facilitating a workshop anytime soon, right? That you can argue that there's no need for a workshop, but I disagree with that because I think people coming together, there's so much power there. And so I think there's a lot of areas where there's still a real need for design, whether people want to think about it or not. And I think if you can invest in those kind of areas, which is really what design has always been about in a way, I think get into those really kind of core fundamentals, and just be prepared. I think most designers are really great with telling other people to be adaptable and to change, and we hate it when it happens to us. We're told to change. So I think just be open and see what happens, really. Be adaptable.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, do as I say, not as I do. I recognize that completely. I have one final question for you. It's the same final question that I ask every guest on the podcast. Are you, Laura Baker, still awaiting approval?
Yes. Do you want me to expand? That's a great question. And my first question was yes from myself. And I think there's a lot of, I think a lot of creators will say it, and a lot of leadership roles and a lot of other people roles, there's the big ugly head of imposter syndrome. And I think that am I still awaiting approval? Yeah, I think I'm awaiting approval from myself in a lot of cases in terms of just being like, yeah, you've got this. Don't worry about it. But I am really curious now to listen to the other episodes and see how other people have answered that question.
Thank you so much for joining me on this and the insights you've given and the candidness with which you've answered the questions. This is your opportunity now. How can people get in touch with you? What would you like to promote? Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. LinkedIn, best place. It's the only sort of channel platform that I'm really on. I'm a lurker everywhere else. So if you, yeah, please do get in touch, send a message. I'd love to kind of hear and speak to more people, kind of share some ideas. So that's really the best place to engage. I don't talk too much about the work that we do. Gotta love NDAs in that sense. But if anyone is interested in anything Fearless related on the design agency or the recruitment side of things, then yeah, I'm also very happy to kind of speak about that.
And thank you so much for joining me today. Really had an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Thank you for inviting me on. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to Awaiting Approval. If you're a creative leader or stepping into a leadership position and want support that's honest, practical and tailored to you, I'd love for you to come and join my Supercharged Creative Leaders Program. It's a 4-week course built around 8 pre-recorded modules, 4 live sessions with me and the rest of your cohort, a private Slack space for you to ask questions and go deeper together, plus ongoing access to my alumni community once you complete the course. Each cohort is capped at just 6 people, so you'll always get personal attention, real feedback, and space to grow. And if you want to tailor the journey further, you can book extra one-to-one sessions with me, and we can dig deeper into the challenges you're facing right now. I built this program based on everything I wish I'd known when I started leading creative teams. No fluff, no jargon, just the tools, frameworks, conversation, and clarity that will actually move you forward. Spots go quickly, so if this sounds like the right fit for you, go to growwithadamjennings.com to book your place on the next cohort. Previous attendees have gone on to win major pitches, land new roles, get promoted, and step into leadership with more clarity, confidence, and purpose. You can find out more and book your place on the next cohort at growwithadamjennings.com. I can't wait to start working with you. Awaiting Approval is a Cordial Fox production, hosted by Adam Jennings, produced by Adam Jennings and Jasmine Egner.